We're very, very pleased that Melissa and Gordon and Patty Bosh, I have to say Patty Bosh because we also have Patty Peets on. And so we're very, very delighted that you all could join us here this morning and that we have them here among us to share a little bit about their own culture and their experience with our culture. And Melissa Skinner and Patty Bosh are sojourners. And so we're pleased with that. And Gordon is a brother, a relative of Melissa's. And so they are all going to speak. Carrie is going to introduce them, and they have the prayer with what they're presenting to us. And so we will just move right into introductions because we want to give them as much time as we can.
So I am very pleased right now to introduce to you Patty Bosh, Melissa Chapman Skinner, and Gordon Treetop Jr. These are amazing people, and I'm blessed to be able to work directly with Melissa and Patty. And Gordon, as many of you know, is active in the Aberdeen Area Diversity Coalition, and he is the Indian Education Director in the Aberdeen school system. And so I'm going to invite them all to share more of their personal story and their journeys with you as their own introduction as they present. And so we're going to start with a prayer, and we'll let them start with that. And welcome all of you. I'm so glad to see so many here and excited we can have this time together. So Melissa, Gordon, and Patty, go ahead.
Okay, so of course, with November being Native American Heritage Month, I believe that this ties into everything that we're doing today and what we've done throughout the month. So this morning I want to share a short prayer with you all, but what I'm going to do is incorporate our Lakota language into that. So I will speak in Lakota and then I will translate that into English, okay? So, matakiapi, chante washte, nape chiuzapi, Melissa Chapman Skinner, imachiapi. Iyan woshla na isanti buya himacha, taya yaha yahi ksto. And what I said was, hello, my name is Melissa Chapman Skinner, and I greet you with a warm heart and a handshake. I am from Camp at the End, Santee, and Camp at the Entrance, Standing Rock, and I am glad you came. So today I honor you in this circle of life with me, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to acknowledge you in this prayer. Wankan Tanka, which means great spirit or creator, thank you for today. Thank you for life and for this opportunity to gather together in a purposeful way as we celebrate the new day, the new week. I pray that you grant us generous hearts, minds, and spirits to guide us in all the work we do together. I pray you grant us strength to continue through life's challenges so that we may be engaged and dedicated members of the PC Saints Tioshbae, which means extended family. I pray that your love and light and compassion can shine upon us this week and the remainder of the year. Mitake oyase. And what I said was, at the very end, it means all of my relatives. And it's a way for us to end our prayer, to end any greeting that we do. If we go into a presentation, that's something that we can use to end that part of it. Thank you.
My name is Patty Bosh, and I spell Patty with an I. I was born and raised on the Turtle Mountain Chippewa Indian Reservation. My reserve is 8 miles south of Canada in North Dakota. I'm half Chippewa and one half French Canadian. My parents were both from this tribe. I grew up with 4 brothers and 2 sisters in a big Catholic family. When we lived in the Turtle Mountains, we grew our own produce in big gardens, and my dad and uncles hunted regularly and supplied all of our fresh meat. We got our clothing secondhand from the Indian Mission, and we all wore plenty of hand-me-downs. The only time I remember getting new clothes was for starting school and at Christmas time. Life was good. My parents took good care of us, and I had everything I needed. I never knew that we were poor. I left the reservation after high school to come to Aberdeen, where I attended the Aberdeen School of Commerce and took classes at Northern State College in the evenings. I dedicated 37 years of federal service to the government, and I also worked 10 years at Avira St. Luke's as the native consultant and chaplain. I left Avira when the pandemic hit. Recalling incidences of racism I've experienced in my life was hard on me. After writing about them and thinking about them, I felt sad initially. They are raw and hurtful, but they made me who I am today. So I offer them to Jesus. I know that living was never meant to be easy, and we suffer many setbacks. I recognize these as things that make us stronger. Thank you.
Thanks.
Gordon?
Okay, all right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, Gordon Treetop here. I'm actually from the same family ties as Melissa, so we both have Santee and Standing Rock in our family history here. I guess I'll start out with Gordon Treetop. I am the Indian Education Coordinator for the Aberdeen School District currently. I have some federal service background as well with Patty. I worked 16 years for the BIA before coming to this position August 2020, right in the middle of our pandemic. I do a couple things in the community as well. Like Carrie was mentioning with the Aberdeen Area Diversity Coalition. I sit on the board with that. I also work with the American Indian Advisory Committee over at Northern State University. I sit on the board with the Aberdeen Area Arts Council as well. What else is out there? There's some other stuff out there. But I guess as far as introductions, I lived in Aberdeen for, I would say, since 1992, 91 area. Before that, I lived in Fort Yates, North Dakota. And my mother moved here right after Missina moved here. She wanted to pursue her degree at Northern State, so we all came down this way. And growing up in Aberdeen was like, it's a different world. Coming out of Fort Yates was very different. You know, Aberdeen's seems like a really cool place, visited one time before for a basketball tournament as a kid, and when I moved here, kind of had a different set of eyes. So I will go down a memory real quick here to get things started of how I came to Aberdeen. I was in 5th grade back in 48. And my mom and them left earlier that year. I stayed back with my sister, Lisa, oldest sister. And you know, I didn't want to go, of course. No kid wants to leave their friends and all their fun stuff, right? So I did everything I could to stay back. Well, one day, got out of school and got home, got off the bus, I had my trumpet case in my backpack, got into the house, and my sister Lisa was at the door, and I remember walking in, and she looked at me and she says, "You have 45 minutes to pack your things. You're moving to Aberdeen." You know, I had no time to prepare for that. You know, as a kid, you know, you're a 5th grader, and to hear that you're moving in a matter of less than an hour was very, very traumatic in a way. Honestly, very. I think about that till this day. I carry that story with me because it relates back to how a lot of our people ended up in schools. You know. Well, all the way back to like 1879, you know, when kids were being pulled out to go to Carlisle or to wherever they were going to these Indian schools or even residential schools. I feel like a lot of that has happened, and I feel like my little story and how I like to start off that way is because we get pulled into these different worlds like that. After that, I got to live here in Aberdeen in this entirely different universe and world, and I didn't know how to react, live, or be. So we work a lot with our students nowadays as we touch base on living in 2 worlds. You know, a lot of our Indian people in Aberdeen live in 2 different worlds, and they have to walk in between those worlds all day long. It's very difficult for them, as it was for myself. You know, a lot of the times I like to think that it's kind of why I love to do what I do every day in my life. I get to work with our students. I've been in their shoes. I've been through that part of life where there's so many unknowns and so many different areas in their life where they don't know what's going on. They just got here from one of our reservations out there in the world, and now they're living in this entirely different world. So for me, it's easily relatable. You know, we share stories like that through our program. Is that me? I heard a noise. Maybe that wasn't me. Okay, so getting back to getting here in Aberdeen, it's part of my introduction. I could remember back to some of your questions we were discussing as tying them into our introductions here. And one of them was, you know, as far as experiencing things relating to white supremacy or whatever you want to call that. When I was in 5th grade, there was a teacher, I won't say her name, but I mean, you guys probably might know her or something. Anyway, we had this play. We had a play, and it was revolved around, I think it was revolving around slavery anyway, that's what I remember. And the teacher picked all the Indian kids out of the class and said that we were going to play the slaves because we're already brown and we're dark enough already, and they don't need a, you know, and I think about those things, and it really drives me to better our community and better our school system. We've come a long way. There's still some things that go on in Aberdeen, though, whether you see it or not, especially in the school system, especially at elementary levels. Year and a half ago, no, last year we had a play. We still had a play at one of our elementaries where they were dressing their students up as Indians with war bonnets and things like that. And you know, we obviously had to put a stop to that because it's not correct. It's not right. It's not fun for our parents to see their students being dressed up as Indians or whoever and trying to be that role without acknowledging the history and understanding how things really happen instead of looking at, look at this week, we got Thanksgiving coming up, you know. A lot of the way we were taught in school it's not correct. You know, I would never degrade somebody's teachings or anything, but there's always a way to educate. I always look at a way to educate our staff and our students through those little mishappenings. I really try to get out to the elementaries as far as through my position now, just to teach our students little tiny pieces of our history and our culture. And a lot of the teachers, you know, they come up afterwards or they'll send their survey in for how they thought it went and whatnot. They talk about how they attempt to do what we do, but they're missing those key stories and those key elements of why things are important, you know. Up until 2 weeks ago, we were doing the buffalo one and we were teaching our students how important the buffalo is. And so we tie in our creation stories and how we relate to the buffalo as our brother and our relative and what that all means. And it really changes the view for the students. They really love those things. And that's what they remember. They remember those story pieces. They don't remember what the buffalo fur is for or any of that. You know, they remember those little intricate pieces that everybody's missing. So there's still a great need, obviously, for Native American teachers, students in Aberdeen. I'll give you some quick numbers here. We got 432 students that are labeled Native American, Alaskan, Indian, however they put it on their form. So we got 432 students in the school district right now, 9 schools. 136 of those are at Central High School. And I tell you those numbers because it's really important to look around the state and look around where we're at. You know, we're supposed to be the 3rd biggest city in South Dakota, and we got a huge number of students. And if you want to look at, even call it discrimination, you can call it whatever, however you see fit with the lack of, you know, people like myself in the school district. There's only one of me for all those students and families. And I think about that, you know, we got plans to find funding down the road, but that's years and years away. School district, we got 630 some odd teachers, faculty, staff, and there's only 4 that are considered Native American or whatever. And that's including myself. And that's a big gap in my mind. South Dakota is comprised of reservations, and our Indian people come to these towns here, just like Aberdeen, Sioux Falls, Rapid City, Watertown, Brookings, these bigger metro areas, and a lot of them lose their culture. They lose those teachings, and they lose those very important things that make us who we are. My job is to reinstill those into our students and our families and find a way to create a little community within Aberdeen. I think we're doing pretty well, you know, between PC and Central and Northern and our community people. I think we're moving forward in the right direction. As far as discrimination, you know, I'll talk about that story again really fast. Was the teacher. There's things that happen all the time, though. And it even happens within the school district. And it's just because they don't know any better. And that's tough for me to say, but I hear it all the time. You know, we had Rock Your Mocks week last week, and one of the teachers, even at Central, made fun. You know, they were like, "Oh, those are really nice slippers," and I'm like, "No." these aren't slippers. These are, these were a gift. That was on Friday, last Friday. But it's just all, for me, I always look at things as an opportunity to educate somebody. I'm not going to sit here and continue to dwell on those. I'll just take it as an opportunity and move forward. There's a couple other things, in Aberdeen that are very, how would you say it? Stuck in time. Especially when we discuss November, Native American month. October, we had Native American Day. And I really kept a keen eye on our social media aspects in our town and our city and our businesses, because not many people put that out there. The change of Columbus Day to Native American Day, it's almost non-existent. There's probably a couple businesses in Aberdeen that labeled it the correct way, and those are the ones that we need to reach out and show other businesses that this is what it is. This is what it should be labeled. We do our best at the school system, but that's just one little piece. To publicly put it out there, that's what we need to do. I think I'll leave it right there for now. We'll get into these questions here. So I will go ahead and pass it on to my sister, Melissa.
So I did introduce myself in the beginning before we did the short prayer. And as a part of our way, what we're taught is to do just that. We introduce who we are, where we're from, and then we could go on to say, this is who our family is. Meaning we would say who our grandparents are, who our parents are. And then I know that there are others where they will say, because we've been relocated, that's another way that we can greet you all, and then we can introduce ourselves. So, okay. So again, I am Melissa Chapman Skinner, and I currently work at Presentation College, and I work for Dr. Welling. We are moving into a newer role as the interim chief academic officer and the academic dean. With that, I also serve on the PC Diversity Committee, and I serve as a stakeholder in the Aberdeen Area Diversity Coalition. I do quite a bit of work with Central, so Gordon, and I do quite a bit of work with Northern, so it would be Laura Nelson. I have recently started working with she's their grad assistant, Laura Nichols. And we do activities, both like at the campus, and then we do within the community. So I also, I guess my volunteer is with Indigenous Ministries of the Episcopal Church, and we do more advocate and training for just its various topics. We could focus on something like the missing and murdered Indigenous women and take that to the United Nations, and we would form a statement and deliver that to they're called a special rapporteur. So we could do it that way. Another way that we could help is to host trainings on what other people could do for becoming advocates, or what they can learn to help us form that statement. We also do, we are lay readers. Most of the people that I work with, they are deacons or priests, or I work with a couple of the bishops in the Episcopal Diocese. So I think I might be one of few, but I'm a lay reader. But so I do that type of work as well. I am a mother, and she is a senior this year, so keeps me pretty busy. I will also share that we are very family oriented. As Mr. Treetop explained to you, that we come from the same family. So I am the only child for my mother. But I had two older brothers, and while some would say those were my half brothers, in our way, we take those as our full brothers. And then for Gordon, who is my first cousin, in our way, I will take him as my brother because our moms are sisters, they're full blood sisters. But then in turn, I will also take his mother as my mother. For our uncles, we will take our uncles as our fathers, or the father figure. So just kind of give you a background of how that works. I think somewhere out there, there's like a meme, one of those pictures where it says, this is how how our family works, and this is how other families work. So I can share that with you. I think that might help a little bit. So and I will also just a little bit of what we're going to go into here. But I grew up here in Aberdeen. I experienced racism, discrimination, and a lot of prejudice, behavior, actions. It was very hurtful. But I always knew that it came from a hurt place, right? Those people, they didn't know, and I've always wanted to help. What can I do to help that situation? And after learning, I got older and I learned from my mother, from my aunts, that they went off to boarding school. And then it was explained how the culture and traditions were stripped away. And so I thought, okay, well, in a sense, we moved here and that was stripped away from us. And even though they're doing their best to help us, how can I help? And I decided I'm going to boarding school. I was not sent away, but I made the decision, probably against my mother's approval. But I decided that I wanted to go to boarding school because I wanted to know, what did my family go through? But then in that sense, what can I do to help? I did not have the experience that they did, which, I'm grateful for. The boarding school that I attended actually encouraged us to practice our culture and our traditions and to be who we are so for me, it was Lakota and Dakota. We had people from the Southwest. We had, Navajo, we had Mescalero, Apache. So it was quite a few different cultures, if you will. I then took all of that, what I learned, and I said, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to learn about our Lakota traditions that way. I'm going to learn so that in turn I can teach others. So I learned our Lakota language. I learned our Lakota history. And I cannot say that I'm an expert in any of this, but because it's a learning process and it'll continue until we're gone. But I learned all of this to help myself, help our people, help our family. Then after college, I decided to take a break. And eventually I went back to school into human services and psychology. And then I flipped the script and I took in social work. Again, I want to know more about the people, the individual, and then I want to learn about the environment and how I can help that way, while incorporating yet our culture. That is where I became more involved with our Indigenous ministries and for our church life back home. So our priest, if you will, he is non-native, but he has done everything that he can to incorporate our traditional, ways into the services. If it's that we're singing in Lakota or Dakota. So I've been able to also help that way. Then I moved to Aberdeen about 8 years ago. because this is where I grew up, and now I'm coming back to this place where what can I do to help? Because I knew that there was the racism, the discrimination, and a lot of hurt people here. But how can I make it better for the generations coming up? What can I do to help those people? So I moved back, and it took me a little while to find my way. I had to, make connections here and there. My brother was then serving on the AADC, and introduced me to people that way. I then started at Presentation College, and my boss, who has always encouraged me to do things like this. So she introduced me to people, and then this is kind of where I'm at right now. I believe that we have a great leadership at Presentation now. I will tell you that we did not always have that. I did not always have the support and encouragement, and I'll go into that more when we're answering questions, but that kind of sums up everything to where I am today. So again, I thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts and my story.
Gordon, we do have a question asking about what can be done to help in the school system. As people who live in Aberdeen, people who may have children in the school system, do you have suggestions of how people may be able to help make changes?
It would have to come from my main goal would be to someday hopefully transition my position over to the school district side, because right now my position is run off of grant money. We all know how grant money works. To have a permanent position within the school district paid for by the school district is one of the main things. And that's just a formality for 2-3 years down the road, kind of a plan to figure out how do we transition my funding for salary to the school district. That would free up what I have now to hire 2 more, at least 2 more coordinators underneath me for maybe the junior high levels or elementary, however that looks. That would be the ultimate plan. As far as right away type things, just to be respectful of somebody's culture. We talk about educating people, but it's really hard when the parents and the grandparents are so set in ways that how they've learned and how they were taught about Indian people. That's the hardest part, is to break those cycles. And it's usually a generational gap. I always see it all the time. We have grandparents that were taught how horrible us Indian people were at one time, and it's like, we weren't horrible. It's not the way it really happened. But that education piece has always been missed all through our history. It's always been this big gap. Now we're coming back up, where we start to talk about education. Public forums would be nice. I think that'd be a great way to discuss and gather some of our community members here in Aberdeen to educate even adults, or even people within our community that would like to understand more about anything that, just kind of like what we're doing right now, but on a bigger level. That would be great. Student wise, most of that would come down, as far as my position, to get that out there. I will tell you that our administration in Aberdeen, I don't know much about the school board members, but I do know our superintendent, vice superintendent, my principal, Dr. Edermark. They are very fully 100% on board, supportive of our programming and all of the things we do. So thinking about down the road, I know we'll get on board with more positions in Aberdeen for our people and our students. But yeah, like I said, right away, things are off the top of my head. just teach the right things. Do your research. Do your research. Teach your students correctly the first time, so we don't have to come back in and clean it up per se, if you want to say it. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. When you think about the history and the teaching, as we look at some of the things that our governor has proposed and the governor's task group regarding the school curriculum around the Native American story, can you help us understand your perspective on that? What do you think about that? And this can be to any of you, all of you. What needs to be included for everybody?
I'll go first, I guess. It's kind of really fresh in my mind. I had a great conversation last week with one of our presenters that came to Northern, Tamara St. John. She's our assistant. I'm sure you guys have heard of her name here and there throughout the weeks. She actually is trying to figure out a way to get me onto that panel and get Aberdeen on that level of where we can have a say of what goes on in Aberdeen and what we're trying to do here for our students. Social studies aspect was as far as the governor, what happened with that and how they removed a lot of the language. I see a lot of the backside of that stuff. I see a lot of what it really looks like versus what media will blast out to everybody. It's pretty harsh. When you really dig in and start talking to people about how this happened, why it happened, and it's just another thing. It's like they're trying to extinguish a part of who we are, and that's been a running thing ever since education began. It's nothing new. We just need to figure out new ways how to combat that, educate. So there's things in the making. It's just you won't ever see them until probably another year or two down the road. But we are moving forward.
Melissa or Patty, do you have anything else that you would like to add to that?
This is Patty. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I feel like maybe some sensitivity training, even though that's likely been done many times in previous years. I think that the school system, the police department, probably even the hospitals, other locations, something on diversity and sensitivity training as a part of orientation should be used frequently and ongoing. I want to share something with you about some of the racism that I've experienced. When I first moved to Aberdeen from the reservation, and I needed to secure lodging, a home to have, or an apartment, I encountered one landlord that told me, I want you to know I'm renting to you because I know how your people are. I rent to you, and pretty soon the whole tribe is living here. That kind of thing, as well as I have lots of things that I'd like to share, even as recent as me working at Avera St. Luke's Hospital. Now, you wouldn't think that educated people would would say some of these things, but unfortunately they do. I saw a patient once that needed some clarification about exactly what the RN had instructed. Well, I was very new there. I think it was my first week. So I called a nursing supervisor and asked for clarification so I could address it with the patient. This was done on the phone. And she asked me in an extremely sarcastic manner when I told her that the patient didn't understand the question. Extremely sarcastic, said to me, "Well, do they speak English?" That way. It hurts my heart when people speak like that. Of course they speak English, but they don't know all the medical jargon. Even at the hospital. Okay. Another incident. I was discussing with one of my coworkers some antic that my teenage son had pulled years ago, and we were kind of giggling about it. We were in the elevator. My supervisor and another minister were there as well. They stayed completely sober-faced. They looked at each other, and one said to the other, "I'm glad we raised good kids." The other one said, "Yeah, kids that never got into any trouble." You know, there again, it just made me feel like I'm the man out. I'm the only one that had a kid that ever did anything wrong. Some of those things are just better left unsaid. I had a waitress once tell me that her and her co-workers don't like waiting on tables that have Native Americans because Native Americans never tip. Well, I wish they wouldn't categorize all of us that way because I certainly tip, and I know many others, friends that I have, we all tip. I want to give you a real eye-opener here. This one happened only 2 years ago. This was in Aberdeen. This was at a busy restaurant in town. A lady and her husband came in. I was dining alone and had a table to myself. I recognized him as a business owner in town. And as they came by looking for a table, I told them they were welcome to sit and join me. Well, they sat down and we made polite conversation at first. At some point, I guess his wife realized I was Native American. She told me that she works at the Boys and Girls Club and that a boy there told her that there are no virgins past the age of 12 on the res. I don't think I said anything. Usually just my way to think about those things and pray about them. But I'll say that it definitely ruined my meal and destroyed my peace of mind because that's all I thought of for a long time after. I did say that a lot of these things were raw, and I need to bring up this one. One of my younger brothers, who's darker skinned than me, this happened in the 70s. And I have to say a clarification on the previous incident there. It was never the restaurant that treated me badly. It was just this other patron, but I knew him as a business owner, so I've not patronized his place since. But anyway, in the 70s, my brother, younger brother, darker skinned than me, very tall, had long hair at the time. He was about 16. He relayed to us, my mom and the rest of my family and my dad, that he was walking to the church and he recognized a nun in her habit sitting in a car. Now, before I go further, I'll just say that on our res, the nuns loved us. We got hugs all the time. They were good to us. And of course, they knew us. But so my brother said as he got close, he was happy to see that it was a nun. He intended to wave and say good morning, say hello. Because we always grew up with the utmost respect for priests and nuns. As I said before, because we were practicing Catholics. Instead, as he got close, he said the nun reached over and locked her door. I remember him coming home to tell us how racist Aberdeen was. I remember how shocked and devastated he was and how it made us feel. And I'm sorry to say this, sisters, because I know you and I know you are all good ladies. But at that time, it hurt us so much that we felt that if even the nuns were racist, we didn't stand a chance in this community. I want to relay something. About 7 years ago on the Fort Totten Reservation, one of my nephews, my eldest nephew, was involved in a tough man competition during Fort Totten's celebration days, when they have their powwow and there might be a rodeo and that kind of thing. So my nephew got involved in this boxing match. And with some freak accident, he became paraplegic when his neck was broken. His spine was severed. His wife and their little children were so distraught, and he was immediately taken into Bismarck and was in a ICU for many, many months. But he was very critically injured. And his wife is from Fort Totten Reservation. During her breaks from when she couldn't be with her husband, my nephew, she'd go to her car and you know, outside she would smudge and she would pray, and she did this routinely during those months and months that he was there. But at some point, someone on the hospital grounds reported my sister-in-law for smoking weed, and the police came. And it wasn't weed, it was smudging. She was cleansing and praying and offering prayers for her husband's health and well-being. I want to relay a couple stories about my mom, who's no longer with us. But her mom died when she was 4, and her dad was an alcoholic and couldn't take care of her. So the tribe sent her away to Wahpeton Indian School. My mom told absolute horror stories that when she first arrived, they were told to strip and shower. Okay, she's 4 years old. And while their skin was still wet, how the matrons came in with cans or whatever that they use to spray DDT. So spraying them to disinfect them from what I guess was supposed to be maybe lice, bed bugs, I don't know. But my mom said it burned their skin and their eyes and it hurt their lungs. And never, my mom said never were any precautions taken or no instruction given to them as such as close your eyes for, hold your breath for a little while we do this. those kinds of things. I'm actually kind of shaking right now. It's just so raw, so very raw. And another time, my mom said when a flu or a viral infection went through the school, how the matrons locked down the dorms to keep it from spreading further, I guess. But Mom said there were lots of kids drinking from the toilet because they were so thirsty and so fevered and were locked up for so many hours at a time. When I worked at Avera St. Luke's, it was always our policy as chaplains to yield to the doctors if we met at a patient's room at the same time. It was my practice to see the ICU patients first. Obviously, they're the most critically ill. I want to get to them right away. So I had a Native American patient on my list, and I went to see him. The doctor got there just before me. So I stepped back while he entered the room. He went in and immediately said to the gentleman in the bed, in a gruff tone, "Wash your face and brush your teeth. I'll be back later." But gee, was that really necessary? You know, to make a person feel like that, this person is critically ill. So those kind of things. Another thing, and these are all so fresh, so in my mind that I can just rattle. I mean, any one of us, we could sit for hours and tell you all the ways that we've been offended by backhanded comments. So while I was serving as the Native consultant and chaplain, it was our practice to have a blessing of the hands day, where we would go to all the various locations in the Avera system, and we would bless the hands of the staff. My name tag only identified me as the Native American chaplain, and I was assigned to a building outside of the hospital campus. When I arrived and word got around that the chaplain was here to do the blessing of the hands, staff were lining up, long lines. But after blessing the hands of the very few first staff members, I could see that others throughout the line were whispering to each other and again dropping out. So I only blessed about 10 people when there had been about 30 lined up. Afterwards, I reasoned that it was most likely because my tag identified me as the Native American chaplain. They probably thought I was practicing some type of voodoo religion on them, and they did not want their hands blessed by me. That day, I came away feeling horrible that something so special and meaningful was likely being misinterpreted. They had no way of knowing that I'm Catholic and that the only religion I practice is the Catholic religion. So those are just some things that I'd like to share with you about some of the racism. There is much, much more I could share. But these are the things that really kind of came to the forefront when I started thinking about things that, ways I'd felt been made to feel less than, or ways that just really broke my heart. So I'll end there, but I will say that I think some kind of sensitivity training ongoing. And people may say, well, yeah, I know that, but, maybe they don't realize maybe that some of these comments could just be better left left by the wayside and not always have to speak whatever the first thing comes to your mind. Because in my way, the way that I am, I know that I'm a sensitive person. I know that I have a sensitive spirit. I would prefer not to have quick comeback or say something to them. My way is to think about it, and the only way I really ever find release and a way to just let it go is through prayer. Just offer everything to the Lord. Just keep him very close, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Those stories are not easy to share, and we appreciate sharing those difficult times because that's how we learn and become more aware. So the three of you have all mentioned education and learning as a way for people to become more sensitive. Are there any books in particular or things that you have come across as far as resources that would help others learn more about history? Might be one thing, or even some simple questions like, do you like to be called Native American, Indigenous person, American Indian, some of those types of things. What would you suggest for us for those? Do you have any suggestions for us?
I could speak a little bit. I always carry one book with me everywhere I go. I don't care where it's at, where I'm, what I'm doing, who I'm visiting with, or students or families. Is Joseph Marshall III. I really look up to him. He's a great guy, great man. But he has a book out there called The Lakota Way, and it's a pretty small book, but what's in it is all of these stories and lessons and teachings, and it's really informative in a way that anybody can relate to. He puts it in a way that makes sense to everybody, not just our Indian people. That's one book I really turn to, especially with some of our students that walk in that are going through, they're having a tough day or whatever. But that's one book I could really recommend to just read and understand a little bit of where we come from. It's obviously not everything, but it's just a little reminder when you read it. You could probably stick it in your purse or your backpack too. It's pretty small. But yeah, teachings, the wording of Native American, Indians, Indigenous. I think a lot of our nowadays events are leaning towards Indigenous. The word Indigenous. I do know a lot of our older people do like to be called Indians. That was the word that it really depends on who you talk to though as well. Native American, it's okay, I guess. It's more relatable. I know that. Like when anybody hears Native American, they know what that entails. But traditionally, you should be referring to us as, what band we're from, where we're located at. Maybe we're Lakota or Dakota or Ojibwe, or that's how you should be relating to Indian people. But it's very difficult because you don't know where they're from. There's so many different areas. So, but if you do know where they're from, I would use that word, whether they're Lakota or Dakota or any of that. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Carrie, can you hear me?
Yes.
I want to say that for my own personal feelings, I consider myself Indian, and on my res and with other Native people, yeah, we're Indian. That's what we are. But I don't like it if a white person would call me an Indian. It's just I would prefer that they call me a Native American or an indigenous. You know, I guess Native American is most accepted, but to me, I'll always be Indian. But like Gordon just said, you know, I'm an elder, and probably some of us older folks, that's what we are. That's how we grew up. That's what we'll always be.
Thank you. Melissa, did you have anything you want to?
No, I won't. So first, I just want to share that I actually have Gordon's mom sitting here next to me. You guys have to know, like, I'm very, very proud of my brother. And so everything that he does, and I'm like, you guys need to listen. You guys need to be a part of this. So we actually did some events last week, and I invited her up and said, you know, you need to be here. You need to be aware of what he's doing. And then I shared that, you know, he would be speaking today, and I said, okay, we need you to be here. so I just want to let you know, like, if I'm looking over, I'm not talking to myself, I'm talking to my aunt. But we kind of, you know, agreed with what both Patty and Gordon had shared, that it's a generational thing where, so our parents, they would like to be called Indian, and it's to each other, they will say that much. But if it's a non-native, or as we say in our language, for white person, it's washichu. But if they were to approach us and say that, they would, that generation prefers Native American. I think now that we're moving into where, like, we're coming up, so Gordon and I are coming up, and then my daughter or our children are coming up, they're going to say Native American or Indigenous people. And that is to be more inclusive to all Indigenous people around the world.
Thank you, and welcome, Gordon's mom. We're glad that you could join us. Melissa, as long as we're thinking about it, we have some questions about PC's curriculum. Do they have any Indigenous studies or anything like that in their curriculum that the students can take? I believe that Northern does have some courses, but what does PC offer their students?
So they do have a couple of, I think they call it American Indian History. And I believe that it's Brad Tennant, who, I'm not sure if he's non-native, but he teaches those courses. And I think that he's, you know, pretty well versed in that information. I think that there's always room for growth. There's always room for updating your information. I will quickly share that a couple of years ago, again, my brother and I attended an event. This is when I first started at PC, and it was Brad who was teaching some information, and it was the language that he used. It could have been better. So we're taught in our way, you don't just call somebody out and say, oh, you're wrong. That's not how you say it. You wait until afterwards, you pull them aside and say, you know, I appreciate what you were doing, but I want to correct this. And so that's what I did. The next day I approached Mr. Tennant and said, we need to correct this language. It was corrected, and he's been using it moving forward. So I think anything that he uses now, he's taken a second look at it, I guess you could say. And then more recently, like just this academic year, I've learned that there's another professor that was teaching. It had something to do with like video or cinematics, but it's Native Americans in cinema, and the information that she was teaching was incorrect. And again, it's the language that she's using. If they could do maybe touch base with somebody that could help them, to make sure that that language is correct, because what she's doing is teaching other students or those students, and we want to make sure that that's correct, because in turn those students are going to go and speak to other students, going to talk to other people outside of PC, could be back home, but we want to make sure that that's correct. When we did approach this professor, I believe there was some hesitation with correcting the language, but again, it's because they were taught incorrectly, right? We know that the history is incorrect, but now moving forward, they have corrected that. So it's kind of a long answer for that, but I hope it helped.
Long answers are okay. As long as we're on some language and education pieces, one of the questions we have is on whose lands we reside and whose lands this was in history. And I'm not even going to try and pronounce this because I'll probably do it incorrectly, but I'll put it in the chat too. And the area where we're living, and when we talk about that, or when we're asked about that, where are we? Whose lands are we on historically?
Who wants to answer that?
Go ahead, Melissa or Gordon, because I know they're talking about the Sakowin. I know they are.
So if you look around the state at every university within the past, I think SDSU was the first. Well, maybe Black Hills State. They're the two main sources for doing things like this. But there's land acknowledgements out there now, and as part of the American Indian Advisory Committee at Northern, we created one of these. I think it was 3 years ago. And I can actually, how about if I look it up real quick and I'll throw it in a link for everybody and you guys can refer to it. But it goes through and it talks about the different tribes that are here, and this is just Lakota and Dakota territory, especially here in the James River Valley. This was a lot of like hunting land a long time ago. And I always tell our students that too, always try to picture them where before Aberdeen was Aberdeen, and before when there was nothing here, then we go forward after that. So when we talk about students and where they're from, a lot of our students, they don't know where they're from anymore. So that's how we start out, is like, this is where you're standing right now. This is where you're from right here. Think about that. But I will put that land acknowledgement in there, and it's part of the Ocheti Shakoni, I think is the word you're talking about. 7 council fires, and those are all the bands that make up this land area, what we used to use for mostly hunting here. But I'll find that land acknowledgement. You guys can refer to that. It's really good to read. Northern utilizes it in all of their bigger events and presentations, and they start out by reading that just to have that acknowledgement in the room, understand where we're sitting today, and then move forward with our presentations. So it's really nice. I don't know if I'm not trying to put PC on a spot, but I don't know if PC has one yet. Hint, hint. I don't know.
We're talking about doing something like that, and we definitely, excuse me, we definitely will check with you to be sure we have the correct language and the correct area named correctly. Will you say, is it Oseti?
Ocheti.
Ocheki. Ocheki Sakowin.
Ocheti Shakomi.
Shakomi.
Sha. Shakomi. You gotta use your way in the back of your throat, way back there.
Shak. Yes, I need a pronunciation, a spelling of the pronunciation.
Yeah. Basically, go ahead, help her out with that. I can send her some.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we're getting close to time, one more question that I think I would like to ask all of you to give probably a fairly brief answer to, but what strikes, when you hear this question, what strikes in your heart that you think is most important about what you would like the white population to most understand about how we can help create or recreate a society that is more mutual and beneficial and inclusive. I'll add that to the question.
Nobody's going first. I'll go first, I guess. I guess off the top of my head, I would like them to know that we're still here. There's a resilience and resilience factor among our students and among everybody in South Dakota that there's this forward driving movement of we are still here. You know, they tried their best to get rid of us, but we're still here. And I say that because everything that's ever been done to Indian people, indigenous people, however you want to word it, has always been an extermination factor. And it's always been an extinction factor. And for our generation, we've had plenty of people before us that thrived on resilience, you know. That's what I would like to leave with that. You know, there's so much other things I can talk about, but that's not gonna, we're on time.
I guess I'd just like to know, like for people to know that before the Europeans came, the native people lived in utopia. They spent their time hunting and collecting berries and making pottery, making clothing from animal skins, helping each other, celebrating the Creator, living in unity amongst their other tribal members. But how all of that changed when the land was taken away and the way of life is gone and the hunting privileges are gone. And even though treaties were written, how they were disregarded. The Indian people were provided commodities, not good, healthy food like we should have got. No, the fattiest, the most greasy, low on the, you know, just food that it really left a lot to be desired. Never anything fresh, just, you know, cans. I want people to know that they are that the Europeans, they're directly responsible for the breakdown of the American people. And now how tied a lot of people are to federal assistance. That was a learned thing. We didn't live like that in our way. It's only now we're so tied to that federal assistance, and no matter what we were promised, everything was broken. Our tribes were given land. Okay, we considered that, okay, this is our land. They gave that to us, only for them to come back a few years later or a few decades later and, oh no, we modified it. Now your res is only going to be this big. And that's how the Black Hills got separated from the from the Lakota and Dakota people. So I want them to know that there's more to it. And you say that people are in class and are reading like the American history of the world or American history. There's things in there that if they were reading that they would know how Columbus wasn't the hero that everybody made him out to be. And yet so many refuse to call it Native American Day after Governor Mickelson had that day dedicated. So they still want to hold up Columbus as a great man and a great leader. Really? He skinned little babies and he raped our women and they brought us all smallpox and really, no, we didn't have any of that. That's what I want people to know is read that American history and then you find out. You see for yourself. Is Columbus somebody we should celebrate and hold up and put on a pedestal? That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you, Patty. Melissa.
Yes. So going off of both what Gordon and Patty have shared, I think it's important for people to know that, yes, as Native American people, we're still here. I know that in the last political, I don't know if it was voting the president in, one of the things that really hit, I think it hit the Indian country was that we were labeled as something else. We were not given the decency of having that correct title, Native American, American Indian, Alaska Native. It was just something else. But what I found was it's that resiliency that comes in, but tied into that is what we call Indian humor, because so much has been done to our people that you have to find the good in it. You have to find, some fun in it. And so, of course, T-shirts were made, bumper stickers were made, all of this because we are something else. That we are more than that. But I think that people have to remember. Again, it goes back to like we're still here and we're in that change that that our ancestors talked about. The seventh generation, they're going to come back and they're going to say, or they're going to change, or they're going to make way for our way, because so much of it was stripped away. And I like to think that that's where we are. Like I said, where Gordon and I are at the start of it, and we're doing what we can, where our children are not going to be, excuse me, but they don't stand for anything. They're very vocal, and I think that's where we're at, to remember we're not going to take it anymore, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But yes, and also we're here to help you, learn the correct history. I think as Patty was sharing, so much was taken away, but it's a good idea to learn that part of it. But I think it's also good to learn the correct history, and that's where we come in as the people to help educate that piece, or help with, all of that. So I think that would be, I guess, what I would want to close with today. I might have something different this evening, but that's what I have to share.
That's okay. So, Sister Janice, we'll just let you finish up. Thank you, everyone. And let Sister Janice tie us all, or close us up, I guess. Tie us all up. Yeah, that was not where my brain needed to go. Sorry about that.
Basically, I just want to thank Melissa and Gordon and Patty for sharing so much of your hearts with us. I know too, it's not easy to share sometimes. We hope that this is a beginning of a new relationship so that we can continue to learn. This is not a one time and done. We're preparing for the second part of our chapter meetings, the sisters are, and those are where we look at direction for the next year, next 4 years, and also then we elect new leaders. And so as a part of that, we're looking at what are the areas that we believe are important that we work in, hold true. And the Native people have always been close to the Presentation Sisters. They fed us when we were first here, when you know our history. And so we owe so much to them. We actually were brought over from Ireland. We were asked to come so we would teach the Native children as well as the settler children. And we didn't ever have a school for Native children. So we have had sisters who have worked on the reservation. Of course, Sister Deb is at Fort Thompson now. And so at different times, sisters have ministered with the Native people. And as non-Natives, we want to understand better. We want to learn the history. We know that you're still here, and we have stood by noticing that you're not noticed. And yet, what have we done? And so we want to change that some way. And we need to continue to learn from you so that we can know how best to do that. So we will continue our discernment, and we are so grateful to you for sharing your stories and really being in relationship with us. So thank you so much.